Welcome to EPG Pathshala for Comparative Literature, a course on performance studies. I am Dr. Pritinisha Burman. I teach English in Women's College, Shillong, Meghalaya. The module that I am going to present is titled Rituals, Festivals and Performance, Theoretical Issues. It has been developed by Palumi Das from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Performance generally refers to a tangible, bounded event that involves the presentation of rehearsed actions. The idea can be extended not just to a play, a dance, or a symphony, but to all events that involve a performer and a spectator. A priest performing a ritual, a politician delivering his speech, a doctor attending his terminally ill patient, citizens revolting against the government, etc. Any activity that involves presentation of rehearsed or pre-established sequence of words or actions is performance. Schechner calls this restored behavior, quote unquote, or twice behaved behavior, quote unquote. So, performance is a concept that can help us understand all types of phenomena, everyday and occasional. While our everyday is filled with such pre-established patterns or routine performances, it is during certain occasions that we start living or performing beyond our mundane existence. These occasions are mostly moments of crucial rupture from the daily performances, replaced by more powerful, effective, ceremonious, and collective ones. These occasions are mostly moments of crucial rupture from the daily performances, replaced by more powerful, effective, ceremonious, and collective ones, those which at times over-empower the very reason of their existence. These events of rupture in a community are called festivals. Therefore, performances and festivals are intricately linked, so much so that sometimes they define the festival of which they are an essential component. The Oxford English Dictionary describes festival as a time of festive celebration, a festal day, also occasionally a festal celebration, merrymaking. Also, a musical performance or series of performances at recurring periods, mostly of 3 years. For example, the Handel Festival, the Birmingham and Norwich festivals. A reader of the Encyclopedia Britannica would find more than 1,890 entries in which the concept of festival has been used, ranging from the artistic festival to all kinds of religious activities. Though festival was initially linked to historical and geographical events of community celebration, it gradually broadened up to include all events of multiple performances. In fact, it is interesting to note that in the second meaning of the word festival by the OED, it means series of performances, quote unquote. This further enhances the importance of this module that sees the interaction, dependence, and communication of performances and festivals. Thus, based on the raison d'etre of the festival, ritual, commemoration, valorizing, celebration, creative expression, etc., the performances associated with it take up different meanings and effects. Marvin Carlson, in his introduction to the 1996 book Performance, A Critical Introduction, What is Performance?, dissects several different uses of the term performance, quote unquote, while recognizing its essential contestedness, quote unquote. where some scholars look at performance as a, I quote, non-ordinary for special use only, unquote. Others turn to it as a framework to understand everyday behavior. In fact, performance is being increasingly used to interpret non-theatrical aspects of the society and the individual. What Alan Reed says about theater and everyday life in his book Theater and Everyday Life equally applies to performance as well. Here I quote, "Everyday life is meeting ground for all activities associated with being human works, play, friendship, and the need to communicate, which includes the expression of theater. Everyday life is thus full of potential. It is the everyday, quote unquote, which habitually dulls sense of life's possibilities. Theater, when it is good, enables us to know the everyday in order better to live everyday life." Irving Goffman, in his 1959 book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, defines performances as, here I quote, "belief in the part one is playing," unquote. It is the activity of an individual or individuals during a certain period in the continuous presence of a particular set of observers and that which has an effect on them. At the two ends of this believing are sincere, quote unquote, and cynical, quote unquote, performers, who with the help of theatrical language intend to reflect reality, quote unquote, or to deceive the audience. This deceiving, though, is not for some private gain or self-interest, quote unquote, but for the good of the audience or the community. As Carlson also suggests, performance is always for someone, even if that audience might be the self. In the case of a festival, the audience can comprise from within as well as outside the community. Now I come to tourism and performance. The presence of tourists just changes the entire dynamics of the performance, as now the politics of representation and performances, which are all about representations, goes on to an altogether new level. As Dean McCannell very rightly mentions, here I quote, "Tourism is not just an aggregate of merely commercial activities. It is also an ideological framing of history, nature, and tradition. A framing that has the power to reshape culture and nature to its own needs," unquote. And festivals are such occasions when the community invites audience from outside. So it would also be interesting to see how the presence of tourists decontextualizes as well as foregrounds the events. For Schechner, I quote, "Performance is encoded, nested, trapped, contained, distilled, held, restrained, metaphorized in one or more special kinds of communication. It should be taken into account that such an understanding of performance stems from its intrinsic utility, communication, between individuals, communities, societies, generations, or traditions. The aggregate of the stage, comprising of the time, space, spectator, and performer, I quote, generates a centripetal field that gobbles up whatever happens on it or near it," unquote. This is where performance process comes close to the ritual process. This module would thus attempt to provide a broad theoretical outline of the notions pertaining to performance in relation to community rights, public festivals, vis-a-vis events. Now I come to the origin of performances, mimesis, fertility cults, and festivity. Performances originated along with man's belief in the spirit. In a world in which it was difficult to distinguish between what was real or unreal, tangible or phantasmal, as Carl Jung suggests, the early man found the whole natural realm surrounding him invested with friendly or menacing spirits. In his attempts to control the menacing forces, he started imitating them. Fraser, in his The Golden Bough, demonstrates how the primitive man's reliance on the power of imitative magic was at the root of all the earliest religions. If he wanted the sun to rise, he lighted a fire in the murky light before full dawn. Or he ceremoniously sprinkled the long porous soil with water if he wanted to invoke rain. Or before going off to combat, he stimulated the battle and slew his imaginative foe to ensure victory. Sometimes, to aggrandize the accuracy of the mimicry, he started wearing imitative masks. But the more sacred ceremonies, like the ones prompted by the changing seasons linked to fertility of the soil, which in turn extended to the fertility of the tribe and observance of other significant natural phenomena, required stricter codes presided by an expert who was at once the chief performer, the director and the choreographer of the entire ritual. Man's strange faith in imitation flowed and strengthened from the efficacy of imitating his elders. That ensured him success, as he acquired knowledge from experience, not just his own. Friedrich Schiller propounds further enhancement in enjoyment in imitation that arises from man's inherent love of play. It is significant that drama is called a play and the performers players. An element of make-believe has always existed in staged quote-unquote events. An innate sense of rhythm also got freed in the imitative sounds he made, in the songs he composed, and the mimic dance and moves that he choreographed. While some rituals had the purpose of commanding the forces of nature, others wanted to appease them. A sense of sin and guilt in the community was exorcised by abasement and ceremonial sacrificial offering, all of which gradually became performances in their own right. A great deal of such pantomimes and dances were also performed for the worship of the totem animal of the tribe, celebrating victory, commemorating significant deeds of fabulous heroes, slowly all this being synonymous with history of the clan. They also celebrated rites of passages or initiation which detailed ceremonies and performances. Later, man became less nomadic and settled down, tilting the soil and making settlements. The fertility rites gained more importance. The passage of seasons and solstices were marked with beseeching awe. Festivals honoring gods of vegetation, fertility, and reproduction became significant. A leitmotif in the primal myth of fertility for most civilizations across the globe is a fertility god who is mutilated and dies, only to be resurrected in spring. Such myths are found everywhere: Japan, China, India, Mexico, Africa, and in many other countries. Thus, the rhythmic pattern of seasons govern man. Everywhere spring is hailed. Such myths are found everywhere: Japan, China, India, Mexico, Egypt, and other African countries. Thus, the rhythmic pattern of seasons governed man. Everywhere spring is hailed joyously, even orgiastically, with phallic pantomimes, songs and dances, though this is often preceded by the mourning of the suffering and death of the year god who is again resurrected. It is interesting to note how all societies have their own fertility myths, yet all of them have similar elements. Food plays an important role in determining the festive cycles. In Egypt, the vegetation god was Osiris. In Syria and Phoenicia, Adonis. And most importantly, in Greece, Dionysius, who would also eventually become the chief god of drama. The recurrent motifs of the stricken, risen god and the sacred marriage gradually infiltrated and infused the Greek culture, inspiring ceremonies and the Dionysian festivals that sow the seeds of Western drama. Thus, it can be clearly understood that performances, in this case specifically drama, has its roots in the community festivals of fertility cults and rituals. The mystery cult of the horned child, quote unquote, Dionysius, was celebrated in the huge festival Saturnalia in Athens. A statue of Dionysius was placed to oversee the loud celebration with music and dance. In a reminiscence of totemism, the celebrants garbed themselves in goat skin, their hoarse chants mimicked the beast's piteous, expiring bleats. Eventually, the choric laments came to be referred to as tragoida, goat songs, quote unquote. Today, religious commemoration and thanksgiving for good harvest are blended in events that take place in autumn, such as Halloween in the northern hemisphere and Easter in the southern. In ancient Greece and Rome, festivals such as Saturnalia were closely associated with social organization and political processes as well as religion. In modern times, festivals may be attended by strangers such as tourists who are attracted to some of the more eccentric or historical ones. Most festivals have religious origins and intertwine cultural and religious significance in traditional activities. Some of the most important religious festivals of the world are such as Christmas, Hanukkah, Diwali, Eid al-Adha, which serve to mark out the year. Others, such as harvest festivals, celebrate seasonal change. Events of historical significance, such as important military victories or other nation-building events, also provide the impetus for a festival. An early example is the festival established by ancient Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses III, celebrating his victory over the Libyans. In many countries, royal holidays commemorate dynastic events just as agricultural holidays are about harvests. Festivals are often commemorated annually. Now, what the ritual becomes. Rituals are performances that provide structure and continuity to our lives. They help us organize the world to fit our perceptions. Rituals are performed to mark the passage of time. Harvest festivals, birthday parties, etc. are such rituals. They also transform our social status, like weddings, graduations, etc. do this, or to ensure good fortune, in the case of blessings, certain prayers, etc., or to keep evil forces at bay, like exorcising, worshipping the dead, etc. Though rituals are based on repetition, they do change over the time in force and expanse. Rituals reinforce and exemplify the beliefs and values of the group that performs them, so much so that communities get defined by them. It is because of the power rituals wield that they are so important, often culminating in a festival. Though virtually all performances have ritualistic behavior, ritual itself can be considered as a performance in its own right. It is immensely important to note that it emphasizes efficacy over entertainment, adherence to tradition over technical virtuosity. Ritual has real consequences vis-a-vis performances that are done for the recreation of the community. Even secular rituals invoke the authority of some concept larger than the individual, the state, the community, tradition. In Liminality and Communitas, written in 1969, Victor Turner emphasizes the liminal or in-between status of the ritual subject, which leads to the feeling of communitas, a social bond between the participants. Rituals, which are part of social dramas that allow a culture to maintain a balance between, I quote, structure and anti-structure. While performance can be a powerful lens through which we can look at rituals, yet Catherine Bell cautions us because its utility is limited. Festival, interestingly, stands at the crossroads of efficacy and entertainment. Thus, while some performances lean heavily on the efficacy scale, others serve the purpose of entertainment more, though they can never be clearly demarcated. To understand how rituals on individuals as well as communal level is and becomes performance. Now I conclude by saying that performance regains its primal dimension in the space of community interactions that take place in various contexts. The construction of the universe of communal meaning finds tangible manifestations through the inventions of performances that assign significations to the myriad rites and practices evolved over time. The absence of the performative aspect would invariably lead to the devaluation of the life world of the communities that has been the foundational locale of cultural and historical references. The rites, festivals and celebrations are parts of familiar and the intimate universe of the communities, and the legacy of which keep reinventing itself through the collective physical manifestations of their performances. Here ends the module Rituals, Festivals and Performance, Theoretical Issues. Thank you.